Okay. Have you ever been in that situation where like you want to say no, but for some reason yes just comes out? Or maybe you have those conversations where as you're walking away, you're kicking yourself thinking, I wish I had said this or I wish I had said that.
Totally, yeah.
Well, if you ever felt that way, you're in the right place.
You're in good company.
Because today we're diving deep into something really, really useful for pretty much everyone. Assertiveness.
It is, and it's something that comes up all the time. And the cool thing is, for this deep dive, we've actually got a combination of your personal insights from your new note
Right.
and this super practical guide called How to Be Assertive Tips and Guidelines. So what's great about these sources is they really break down what assertiveness actually is, right? Like what it means to be assertive,
Right.
and importantly, what it isn't, because there's a lot of misconceptions about it.
Yeah, definitely.
And then it also gives us some really concrete tools and strategies that we can use to actually start being more assertive in our day-to-day lives.
I love that. And I think, the goal today is not just to define assertiveness, but it's really to pull out the most useful and valuable insights from these sources so that you, listening, can walk away with a bunch of aha moments.
Yeah,
And be able to actually communicate more confidently,
for sure.
maybe have God relationships, and even reduce some of that stress that we all deal with on a daily basis.
Absolutely.
So let's jump right into it. So according to our sources, what is the core of assertiveness? What are we really talking about here when we say assertiveness?
Yeah, so the pasted text, that guide we were talking about, I think it summarizes it really well. Expressing your thoughts, feelings, and desires in a transparent, straight, and respectful way. So I think what's really important there is that balance, right? It's about being clear and direct about what you need, what you want, how you're feeling.
Yeah.
But doing it in a way that respects the other person, that takes their feelings into account.
Right. So it's not about being a pushover. It's not about being passive. It's not about letting people walk all over you. But it's also not about being aggressive and just steamrolling over everyone to get what you want.
Right. It's that sweet spot in the middle.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
It's finding that middle ground.
Yeah.
And I think the guide really does a good job of clarifying that because it goes into the difference between being assertive and then those other styles like passive and aggressive communication.
Right.
And one thing that it points out is that if you tend to be more passive, always agreeing, going along with things, maybe avoiding conflict, what you're unintentionally communicating is that your own thoughts and feelings aren't actually that important.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that can create a lot of problems down the line.
Exactly right. It can lead to all these negative feelings. The guide mentions resentment,
Yeah, resentment.
self-doubt, feeling taken advantage of. So it really does have an impact on you when you constantly put other people's needs ahead of your own.
Yeah. And on the other hand, like, while being aggressive might get you what you want in the moment, right? It might seem effective at first, but the guide really stresses that in the long run, that can actually damage your relationships. And it's not really a sustainable way to interact with people.
Yeah, it makes sense. So where does somebody start if they want to start moving more towards that assertive style?
Yeah, that's the big question.
Yeah.
Well, one of the most fundamental ideas that the pasted text brings up is this idea of knowing your rights.
Okay, interesting.
And I know that might sound a little bit formal, right?
It sounds very legalistic.
Yeah, exactly. But what it really means is recognizing that you have the right to express your own opinions.
Right.
You have the right to say no without feeling guilty about it.
Yeah.
And even you have the right to make mistakes. You don't have to be perfect.
Ah, that's so important.
Right. It's almost like giving yourself permission to be human and to actually advocate for what you need and what you believe in.
Yeah, and to mess up sometimes.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important distinction too, because it's separating that from aggression. Right. Because sometimes people think that being assertive means being perfect
Right.
and never making a mistake.
Like you have to have it all figured out.
Yes, exactly.
But that's not the case.
And that can be really paralyzing.
Totally.
So, okay, we have a better understanding of what assertiveness actually is and why it's so valuable.
Yeah.
So let's get down to the practical stuff.
Yeah, let's get tactical.
Let's get into the tactics here.
Yeah.
What are some concrete things that our sources recommend for actually becoming more assertive?
So the pasted text has this whole section on practicing clear communication,
Perfect. I love that.
which I think is just gold, and it really stresses the power of using I statements.
Okay.
Right. So instead of saying something like, you always interrupt me,
Yeah.
which can immediately make the other person defensive.
It's like an attack.
Right.
Yeah.
An I statement would be something like, I feel unheard when I'm interrupted. So you're shifting the focus to your own experience and how you're feeling.
Yeah.
And it makes the other person a lot less likely to get defensive because they don't feel attacked.
And I think that's such a key difference, right?
Yeah.
Because it's, like you said, it's not blaming them.
Exactly.
It's not saying you're doing this wrong. It's saying, this is how I feel when this happened.
Right. It's owning your own feelings instead of blaming their actions.
I love that. So using I statements?
Yes.
Yeah.
Big one.
Okay, what else?
So the guide also talks about the importance of being direct and specific with your language.
Right.
So avoiding those vague kind of wishy-washy statements that can easily be misunderstood, you know? Like really saying what you mean.
Right, and seeing it clearly and directly.
Exactly.
And then there's another one that I think a lot of people don't realize how powerful it is,
Oh, yeah.
and that's eye contact.
Yeah, eye contact is huge.
Like looking the person in the eye when you're talking to them.
Yeah, it makes a huge difference.
It really projects that confidence.
Totally.
But it's not just about what you say,
Right.
The guide also talks about active listening.
Yes, such an important part.
So tell me more about that. What does it mean to actively listen?
So active listening basically means giving the other person your full attention, like really being present in the conversation.
Right, not just waiting for your turn to speak.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
you can show them that you're listening by using verbal cues like, I understand, or that makes sense.
Yeah.
And also by asking clarifying questions to make sure you're really understanding their perspective.
So it's not just about getting your point across.
Right.
It's also about really understanding where the other person is coming from.
Exactly. Because assertiveness is not about winning.
Yeah.
It's about communication.
It's about that two-way street.
Yeah, for sure.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
And another thing that both sources talk about is managing your emotions.
Oh, yeah. That's huge.
And I think this is something that people sometimes overlook, When they think about assertiveness, they don't realize that it actually starts with managing what's going on inside of you. So what are some of the suggestions for how to do that?
So the guide suggests that you start by identifying your triggers.
Okay, that makes sense.
Right. So what are those specific situations or those types of interactions that tend to make you feel anxious or angry or frustrated?
Mm-hmm.
Because once you know what your triggers are, you can start to be more aware of your reactions in those moments.
Yeah.
And then you can respond more assertively instead of just reacting emotionally.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Right. And then it also emphasizes this very simple but powerful technique of just staying calm, taking a few deep breaths.
Right, just taking a pause before you respond.
Exactly.
Yeah, that can make such a huge difference in how you're able to communicate.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think that leads perfectly into the next point, which is setting boundaries.
Yes. Boundaries is such a crucial part of assertiveness.
Absolutely. So what does it mean to set boundaries, and how do you do it effectively?
So setting boundaries is really about knowing what your limits are, right? What are you comfortable with? What are you not comfortable with? And then communicating those limits clearly and consistently to other people.
Yeah. And I love the example that the guide gives.
Oh, yeah. Tell me about it.
It's a very simple one, but it's so illustrative.
Yeah.
It says something like, I can't work late this week, but I'm available next week.
Perfect example.
Right, so it's a clear no to the immediate request, but it also offers an alternative.
Right.
So it shows a willingness to engage, but on your terms.
Exactly. It's not just shutting the door. It's saying, hey, this doesn't work for me, but here's what does work.
Exactly. I love that.
And sticking to those boundaries is just as important as setting them,
Yeah, that consistency is key.
Absolutely, because that reinforces your assertiveness and it helps other people understand and respect your limits over time.
And there's one last point that I think is really important to mention, which is the connection between self-confidence and assertiveness.
Oh, yeah.
That's huge.
Because the source points out that if you don't have a strong sense of your own value and worth, it's going to be a lot harder to stand up for yourself and to express your opinions with that conviction.
It's like that inner strength that allows you to actually be assertive.
Exactly.
And the guide suggests that taking time to acknowledge your own achievements and to actively challenge those negative thoughts can really boost your ability to be assertive in different situations.
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
And finally, the pasted text suggests that we should be actively practicing assertiveness.
Yeah, that's so key.
So what are some ways to do that?
So they recommend role-playing.
Okay, so like practicing those conversations.
Exactly, like maybe with a friend or a family member, where
Yeah.
you can kind of try out different
Yeah.
scenarios and experiment with different assertive responses.
So it feels safer than doing it in the real world for the first time.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And then another thing that they suggest is seeking feedback from people you trust.
Yeah, like, hey, how did I do?
Exactly, because they can give you really valuable insights into how your communication style is coming across
Right.
and maybe highlight areas where you can improve.
That's so valuable because we all have blind spots.
Totally.
Yeah, perfect. So let's do a really quick recap for our listeners of the key takeaways from today's deep dive into assertiveness.
Let's do it.
So first of all, assertiveness is about expressing your thoughts and feelings and desires respectfully and directly.
Right.
Right? It's not about being a pushover. It's not about being aggressive. It's about finding that middle ground.
Yeah.
And it's a really important communication skill to develop.
For sure.
It not only boosts your self-esteem,
Mm-hmm.
but it also earns you respect from other people.
Yeah.
We also talked about the importance of knowing your rights.
Yeah.
You have the right to express yourself, to say no without guilt, and even to make mistakes. And then we went into some really practical strategies like using I statements,
Yeah. Those are power
being direct and specific in your language,
Mm-hmm.
maintaining eye contact,
Totally.
and also actively listening to the other person.
Right. It's a two-way street.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then we talked about managing your emotions by identifying your triggers, staying calm, and setting those clear and consistent boundaries.
Yes. All essential parts of being assertive.
And, of course, the link between self-confidence and assertiveness
For sure.
and how important it is to recognize your own achievements and challenge that negative self-talk.
Absolutely.
So now that you've got all of these insights and strategies, here's a final thought for you to consider.
I love it.
Think about one specific situation in your life where you often find yourself feeling less assertive than you'd like to be.
Yeah.
What is one small, concrete step that you can take,
Mm-hmm.
drawing on all the things that we've talked about today,
Yeah.
to start communicating more clearly and confidently in that specific situation?
Such a good question.
It could be anything from using an I statement to practicing saying no,
Yeah.
to just taking a moment to breathe and collect yourself before you respond.
Totally.
Just identifying that one small step can be the start of a really amazing journey towards becoming a more assertive and empowered you.
It's a journey, not a destination.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, that's all the time we have for today's deep dive.
That flew by.
It did, but I hope you found it helpful, and we'll see you next time.
See you later.
Bye.
Bye.